Good morning, dear students. In this video, I will continue with the story The Little Magic Girl by Hans Christian Andersen. In the last video, I had stopped at a point in the story when the child for the second time had lit a matchstick and the light of the matchstick had fallen on the wall, and as far as the light had fallen, it had made the walls grow transparent just like a gauze, and through which she had seen this beautiful, comfortable home, this room, and a table at the center which was covered by a fine shining tablecloth with china crockery on it, and a platter with a roast goose, and the goose jumped off, had come waddling to her with a carving knife and a spoon on its back, inviting her to devour it, to have it, to eat it up. And all that was lost once the matchstick went out. Then next, have your books open at page 90 while you follow this video. She struck another match with all her courage to keep her warm, and she was now beginning to feel nice with all that she was seeing in the light of the match, in that cold, bitterly cold, lonely, dark evening, New Year's evening, when all the houses with their windows were bright and shining. Here was this little child under the open sky, unprotected, bare, without even a cap on her head, without shoes or slippers, on the cold ground, fighting to survive. And what was worse, with the fear of being beaten if she went home. She struck another match, and suddenly she was sitting under the most beautiful Christmas tree. In the light, she had seen this Christmas tree. It was much larger and much lovelier than the one she had seen last year, the previous year, through the glass door of the rich merchant's house. So, the previous year, so it tells us, the author tells us that her situation hadn't changed over the past year. It was the same. She had remained poor, and it was worse now. She had seen in the previous year this particular Christmas tree, and where had she seen it? She had seen it through the glass door of a rich merchant's house. It was in a rich merchant's house, and she had peeped and she had seen this beautiful Christmas tree. But this Christmas tree which she was seeing right before her was much more grander, was much more lovelier, and much more larger than what she had seen the previous year in the house of that rich merchant through the glass door. And this particular tree that she was seeing at that point of time, had 1,000 candles lit up, and green branches and gaily colored balls like those in the shop windows looked down upon her. So, on this tree, gaily, G-A-I-L-E, gaily means happily, brightly colored. So, there were 1,000 candles that lit up the green branches of this Christmas tree, and they were happily colored, brightly colored, very attractively colored balls which you see on Christmas trees, if you can imagine, like those in the shop windows looked down upon her, and the colorful balls and the lights seemed to, call her, invite her, and look down upon her, look down, with love and affection upon her. The little girl reached forward with both hands then went out. The many candles on the Christmas tree rose higher and higher through the air, and she saw that they had now turned into bright stars. One of them fell, streaking the sky with light, and as soon as this matchstick went out, what had she seen? She had seen that the many candles on the Christmas tree, which was right before her, rose higher and higher and higher and higher and went through the air, rising up high in the sky. And then she had seen that the candles had turned into stars, into these bright stars, and one of them fell, streaking, and one of those bright stars had come descending down, streaking, forming a band, forming a stripe of light across the sky in the dark night. And then she recalled the words of her grandmother. "Now someone is dying," said the little girl, and she remembered what her grandmother had said, that when someone died and his or her soul rose up, ascended to go to heaven, the soul would become this bright light, and as it would travel, it would leave that band, that stripe on the face of the sky. So she recalled that someone was dead, and here the author brings in this element of death in his story, and how grave and serious it can be for some people who die lonely. Grave and serious in the sense when you have no one with you at the time of death, when there is no loving friends, no loving parents, no loving relatives by you or by someone, it becomes more gruesome. So now someone is dying, she said in her little voice. For her old grandmother, the only one who had ever been good to her, the only person who had ever been kind and affectionate to her was her grandmother, and she remembered her words that when a person died, the soul rose up in the form of a bright light, streaking the sky, forming a stripe across, a band across the sky. And when she saw these candles rise up from stars and one fall, streaking the sky, that thought, and she uttered the words that her grandmother had used. Then, what happened next? Now someone is dying. At what did she say? She said it when she had seen one of the stars fall and forming a streak across the sky of light. Said the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only one who had ever been good to her but who was now dead, the only one who had been loving and kind and caring, was dead, and she was all alone. She felt lonely, though she had her father, and that is what she felt, and this is what she goes on to say next. Had said, and what her grandmother had said, which she repeats: whenever a star falls, a soul goes up to God. Whenever a star falls, it is the soul of a dead person, a good person who has gone to heaven, and in reaching the sky, in reaching heaven, he or she, her soul in the form of a light, leaves this streak across the face of the sky. So these were the words that her grandmother had used, describing to her at the sight of a falling star. At the sight of a falling star. Whenever a star falls, a soul goes up to God. She struck another match on the wall as she did not want to be lonely, hungry, tired, and feeling feared in the cold, dark night. One more, there was light again. And in the glow, in the brightness, stood her old grandmother. Oh, so bright and shining. She looked, and looking so gentle as she was. Kind and loving, she appeared. Granny, cried the little girl, oh, take me with you. She wanted, she yearned, she pleaded to her granny to take her with her. She knew that she was dead and she was unreal. But at that point of time, it was so surreal, it seemed so real that her grandmother was standing before her and she was pleading to her to take her with her. She looked so calm, so gentle, so bright, so majestic and beautiful and shining with light. Oh, take me with you. I know you will disappear when the match is burnt out. And she was afraid that she would disappear as soon as the light of the match, the flame would go out. You will vanish like the warm stove, the lovely roast goose, and the great glorious Christmas tree. These were the things that she had. She had seen and had kept her alive and motivating her, encouraging her, filling her heart with the warmth to survive the cold, to survive the loneliness, to survive the hunger, and especially that dreadful cold night. When all else was bright and shining, all the homes were celebrating, the irony was this little girl whose requirements were so small was dying all alone and clinging on to life by the light of the match. And now she was giving up. She was asking her grandmother to take her with her. Oh, take me with you. I know you will disappear when the match is burnt out. You will vanish like the warm stove, like the lovely roast goose and the great glorious Christmas tree. All these are symbols. The light is a symbol. The stars are again symbol of the souls and goodness. The fire of warmth and happiness, of purity. The Christmas tree, a symbol of peace and celebration, and the welcoming of baby Jesus, and warmth and care. And the roast goose was a symbol of plenty and plentiful and joy and sharing. So many symbols are used to create that picture when the narrator narrates his story. So these elements are all used to help us imagine vividly and clearly what the narrator relates and says in the story. Then she quickly struck all the rest of the matches because she did not want to lose her grandmother. She had in the packet, for she did not want to keep her grandmother because she did so wanting to keep the grandmother with her and not lose her and become lonely, hungry, tired, fearful, and cold. The matches flared up with such a blaze, with such a strong bright light that it was brighter than the broad daylight. And suddenly all the matchsticks which she struck came on, and the light was so bright, it was brighter than a bright daylight. And her old grandmother, there she was, had never seemed to her so beautiful ever, and so stately means so majestic, so attractive, so brilliant, so splendid, so elegant and gracious, and so, brilliant that she had never seen ever before. meaning of stately? Majestic, splendid, grand, elegant, graceful, and looking brilliant and beautiful that she had never seen. She took the little girl in her arms. The grandmother embraced the little girl in her arms and flew with her up, high up, oh so high, towards glory, towards the grandeur of heaven, towards the grand, peaceful, harmonious heaven, to the beauty and the impressive heavens. That is the meaning of glory. And to the joy of heaven, to a place where happiness persists and exists forever. She rose up towards the glory and the joy. Now they knew neither cold, nor hunger, nor fear, for they were both with God. Now that grandmother had taken her with her to heaven to be joyful and enjoy the peace and harmony and warmth of God in heaven forever. An innocent little child dying with her soul escaping, embraced by the grandmother, taken to heaven to enjoy the everlasting joy of love and happiness. But in the cold dawn, when the sun came up, before the sun could actually come up, at dawn, in the corner formed by the two houses, sat the little girl. That's not very difficult to imagine, with rosy cheeks, with those red cheeks of her that she had, and smiling lips. She was not sad because she had died experiencing the joy of being with the only person who loved her, her grandmother. And she had these smiling lips and she was dead. Her carcass lay there, her dead body lay there with a smiling face, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year, of the passing year, when everybody is full of celebration, happiness, welcoming the new year. Here was this little child dead, frozen to death in the last evening of the year. The dawn of the new year rose on the hurdled figure of the girl, and the sun rose and fell on the hurdled figure, on the this little figure with her feet all hurdled and with this bright smile on her face. It was indeed sad. She was still holding the matches in her hand, and half a packet had been burned. She had used half, and the other half was still with her in her hand. She was evidently trying to warm herself from what it seemed to the others who watched her. It was just a very sad sight that this child had died in the cold, because of the brutal cold, and she had tried to strike the matchsticks in order to save herself from the cold, but actually she had struck the matchsticks in order to keep her grandmother with her, to experience all the joys of New Year, the roasted goose, the Christmas tree, the stove, the warm stove, all these things that she had seen that night. And mostly she had used the matchstick to have that light where she would be with her grandmother, safe and loved. She was evidently trying to warm herself, people said, and people just plainly commented that this was a simple death and she was just trying to keep herself warm. But no one knew what beautiful visions she had seen, and in what a blaze of glory she had entered with her dear old grandmother into the heavenly joy and gladness of the new year. And no one ever understood the spiritual joy that she experienced being one, being able to find her grandmother, being with her at that time of death, and embracing her and taking her to heaven to enjoy the everlasting happiness and peace and be loved forever with the very person, live with the very person who loved her. No one understood that spiritual happiness which she experienced on that evening, being lonely on the street in the corner of those two houses. It was much more richer and grand than any other form of happiness which others had experienced celebrating inside their closed homes. She had the greatest joy of welcoming a new year. And what was that? She was one with her grandmother, the only person who loved her, and she ascended to heaven to be with God, to experience the everlasting joy of heaven. And this happiness which she experienced lighting those matchsticks was priceless. No material terms could explain the joy which she experienced, which was much greater, much more valuable, and much more precious than any happiness that one had experienced on the New Year's Eve. So with that, gentlemen, I come to an end. So what did we learn in this little video? We learned how she lit the matchstick and the Christmas tree she had envisioned, she had vision, and the stars, and when the matchstick went out, the candles on the Christmas tree rose up to form stars, and one came falling across the sky, forming a streak, and she recalled what her grandmother had said, that when a person died, it would form, whenever a star fell, it would form, it would be actually the soul of a good person who had died and had risen to go to heaven, and this falling star represented the good soul forming a streak in the night sky. And she struck another matchstick on the wall, and in the glow she had seen her grandmother. She cried out to her grandmother to kindly take her, embrace her, and take her with her. And she didn't want to lose the vision of her grandmother, the sight of her grandmother. So she lit up all the matchsticks. She was afraid that she would disappear, just like the warm stove had disappeared, just like the lovely roast goose had disappeared, just like the glorious Christmas tree had disappeared when the flame of the matchstick had gone out. And then she got out the packet and she lit it, and to keep her grandmother with her, the matches flared up, and in that brightness she had seen, which was much more brighter than even broad daylight, she had seen her grandmother pure, bright and beautiful. Never had she seen her grandmother so beautiful, so bright and so majestic. She embraced her in her arms, and together they rose higher and higher and higher to heaven, to be one with the glory, in the glorious presence of God, celebrating all joy and happiness forever. And now they did not, at that point of time, they did not know any hunger, no fear, and both were one with God. And when the sun rose and when people saw, people just took it as it was a poor child who had died on the road trying to keep herself warm by lighting on the matchstick. Actually, no, she had lit the matchsticks to keep the grandmother with her, the warmth of her love and affection with her. And she experienced the greatest bliss on the New Year evening, which nobody else did. And she had the greatest gift of ascending with her grandmother to permanently live with her in heaven. And that was the greatest gift of the vision of her grandmother and being taken to heaven by her grandmother. So, gentlemen, kindly go through the story, read it well, and in the next video I will talk about the themes and the symbols in particular on this story. So thank you.